My sister announced she was quitting her job and didn't want to work anymore. My parents immediately decided I would cover for her. The next day, she tried to force me to co-sign a new car loan. I'm female, 28 years old, and for most of my life I thought family meant unconditional love and support. That naive belief shattered on a Tuesday evening in March 2024 when my world turned upside down over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. My younger sister, Madison, had always been the golden child. While I worked 2 jobs through college, she breezed through with a communications degree funded entirely by our parents. While I saved every penny for my small apartment, she lived rent-free in their basement, supposedly finding herself. At 25, Madison had held exactly 3 jobs in her entire life, each lasting less than 6 months before she quit due to toxic work environments or unsympathetic bosses. That Tuesday dinner started normally enough. Mom had made her famous meatloaf, and Dad was discussing his upcoming retirement from the insurance company where he'd worked for 32 years. Madison picked at her food, complaining about her current job at a local boutique where she worked part-time folding clothes. "The manager expects me to actually show up on time," she whined, twirling her fork in the mashed potatoes. "And yesterday, this customer was so rude because I couldn't find her size in the back room. I don't get paid enough to deal with that kind of stress." I bit my tongue, remembering my own retail days when I'd smile through much worse treatment while working full-time and attending night classes. But Madison wasn't finished. Suddenly, she stood up from the table, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a dramatic flourish. Her eyes were bright with something that looked almost like excitement as she declared, "I'm tired. I don't want to work anymore." The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds before my parents erupted into applause. Actual clapping. Mom's face lit up like Madison had just announced she'd cured cancer, while Dad beamed with pride. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," Mom exclaimed, clasping her hands together. "You've worked so hard, and you deserve to focus on what makes you happy." My fork clanged against my plate as I set it down, staring at the surreal scene. Madison had worked maybe 20 hours a week for 4 months, and they were celebrating her decision to quit. Then Dad turned to me with that familiar, expectant expression, the one that always preceded another favor I'd be asked to do for Madison. "From now on, you cover for her. Whatever she says, you do." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Excuse me, Sarah, sweetie," Mom said in that patronizing tone she'd perfected over the years. "You've always been so responsible, so capable. Madison needs time to figure out her passion, and we know you'll step up like you always do." "Step up how exactly?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. Madison smiled sweetly, the same smile that had gotten her out of chores, homework, and consequences her entire life. "Well, I'll still need my lifestyle maintained while I explore my options. Car payments, shopping, going out with friends. You understand, it's temporary, just until I find my calling." I stared at each of them in turn, waiting for someone to laugh and admit this was all an elaborate joke. When no one did, the reality of their expectations settled over me like a suffocating blanket. "You expect me to pay for Madison's life while she does what exactly?" "Whatever makes her happy," Dad said firmly. "You make good money at the marketing firm and you don't have many expenses. It's the least you can do for family, the least I could do. After putting myself through college, working 60-hour weeks to build my career, and never asking them for a dime since I turned 18, supporting my adult sister was apparently the least I could do." I excused myself early that night, claiming I had work to finish. Nobody seemed to notice my shell-shocked expression or the way my hands trembled as I gathered my purse. They were too busy planning Madison's freedom journey and discussing how wonderful it was that she was prioritizing her mental health. The next morning, I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. Madison's contact photo, a selfie she'd taken with my expensive camera without asking, filled the screen. "Sarah, good news," she chirped, her voice bright with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just spent someone else's money. "I found the perfect car yesterday, a certified pre-owned BMW 3 Series in silver. The dealer said, I have excellent taste." My stomach dropped. "Madison, you can't just buy a car without—" "Oh, but I didn't buy it yet," she interrupted. "I mean, I picked it out and everything, but they need a co-signer since I don't have income right now. You'll get the forms to sign. Don't delay. I promised Jenny I'd pick her up for lunch tomorrow, and my old Honda is just so embarrassing." The casual entitlement in her voice made my vision blur with anger. "Madison, that BMW probably costs $40,000. I'm not co-signing for a car you can't afford." The line went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost all its artificial sweetness. "You'll sign the papers, Sarah. Mom and Dad already explained the arrangement to you. The arrangement where I become your personal ATM while you play house. I don't think so. We'll see about that." She hung up, and I sat there staring at my phone, wondering how my family had become people I didn't recognize. That evening, I decided to drive over to their house to have a calm, rational conversation about boundaries and expectations. I still believed somewhere in my naive heart that I could make them understand how unreasonable their demands were. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew I'd made a mistake. All three of them were waiting in the living room like some twisted intervention committee. Madison sat in Dad's recliner, his sacred chair that no one else was ever allowed to use, while Mom and Dad flanked her on either side of the couch. Sarah, Dad said in his stern voice, the one he'd used when I was 16 and came home past curfew. Madison told us about your conversation today. We're disappointed in your selfishness. Selfishness? The word came out as a croak. How is refusing to co-sign for a car I can't afford? Selfish? Madison rose from the chair with theatrical grace, her face twisted into an expression of hurt and betrayal. How can you be so cruel to your own sister? After everything our parents did for you, this is how you repay them. Everything they did for me, I stood up straighter, finding my voice. They did for you, Madison. I paid my own way through college, bought my own car, got my own apartment. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. Madison's palm connected with my cheek with a sharp crack that echoed through the quiet room. The force of it made me stumble backward, my hand flying to my face in shock. For a moment, nobody moved. I touched my lip and felt wetness. She'd split it open with her ring. Madison, I gasped. But before I could say anything else, Mom was on her feet. Sarah Elizabeth, apologize to your sister right now, Mom demanded, her face flushed with anger. How dare you upset her like this? I stared at her in disbelief. She just hit me. You deserved it, Dad said coldly. Your attitude is unacceptable. Madison is going through a difficult time. And instead of supporting her, you're being selfish and cruel. Madison began to cry. Not real tears, but the fake practiced sob she'd perfected in childhood to get out of trouble. I just want to feel normal, to have nice things like other people. Is that so wrong? Sarah has so much, and I have nothing. You have nothing because you quit every job you've ever had, I said, wiping blood from my split lip. You have nothing because you've never worked for anything in your life. That's enough, Dad roared, standing up from the couch. Your duty is to support your family, not judge them. If you can't fulfill your obligations as a daughter and sister, then don't ever step foot in this house again. The ultimatum hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I looked at each of their faces, searching for some sign of the people who had raised me, who had supposedly loved me. Instead, I saw strangers wearing familiar faces, united in their belief that I existed solely to serve Madison's whims. I wiped the blood from my lip one more time, tasting the metallic bitterness on my tongue. Fine. The word came out steady and calm, which seemed to surprise them more than if I'd screamed. Fine, Mom repeated uncertainly. You want me gone? I'm gone. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. Don't call me, don't text me, don't show up at my apartment. As of right now, I don't have a family. Sarah, wait. Mom started, but I was already opening the front door. You'll come crawling back, Madison called after me, her voice dripping with false confidence. You always do. You can't survive without us. I turned back one last time, meeting her eyes across the room. Watch me. The next morning started at 6 a.m. with the first phone call. I was getting ready for work when my phone buzzed with Mom's contact information. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again, then again. By the time I left for the office, I had 14 missed calls from various combinations of Mom, Dad, and Madison. The voicemails started desperate and quickly turned angry. Sarah, honey, call me back. We need to talk about last night. That was Mom. Sarah, this is ridiculous. Call your mother back. Dad, you're being dramatic and everyone knows it. Call me back so we can figure out the car situation. Madison. I deleted each message without listening to it fully and blocked all 3 numbers before I reached my office building, but they were persistent. Around noon, my work phone rang. Sarah Mitchell's office. I answered in my professional voice. Sarah, thank God, Mom's voice came through the speaker. You blocked our numbers. How could you do that to your own family? I'm at work, Mom. I can't talk about personal matters on my work line. This is about Madison's car. The dealer called this morning asking about the cosigner paperwork. You're embarrassing her, Sarah. She promised her friends she'd have it today. I closed my eyes and counted to 5. I'm not cosigning for anything. I made that clear yesterday. But you have to. She already told people. I hung up and immediately called the front desk to block any personal calls from being transferred to my extension. The harassment continued for 3 days. They recruited extended family members, family friends, even our old neighbor Mrs. Patterson to call and guilt me into doing the right thing. Each caller had the same message: I was being selfish. Madison was fragile and family was supposed to stick together no matter what. By Thursday, I was exhausted from dodging calls and explaining to concerned relatives that I wasn't having a breakdown. I was having a breakthrough. The final straw came when Madison somehow got my work address and showed up at my office building. I was leaving for lunch when I spotted her standing by the reception desk wearing designer jeans and a leather jacket I'd never seen before. New purchases, no doubt made with the credit cards my parents funded. "There you are," she said brightly as if nothing had happened. "I was hoping we could grab lunch and sort out this silly misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Madison. I'm not signing your car loan." Her smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Don't be ridiculous. You're my sister. Of course you're going to help me. I'm not your sister anymore. You made that clear when you slapped me and Mom and Dad kicked me out for not being your personal bank account." "Oh, come on." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're being way too dramatic. It was just a little slap. You've always been so sensitive." The receptionist was watching our conversation with undisguised curiosity, along with several of my colleagues passing through the lobby. This was exactly the kind of scene I'd hoped to avoid at my workplace. "Madison, you need to leave. If you come here again, I'll call security." "You wouldn't dare," she said, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Try me." I walked past her toward the parking garage, and she followed, her heels clicking frantically on the concrete as she struggled to keep up. "Sarah, wait. You're ruining everything. I already told Jeremy about the car. He thinks I'm getting it today. How am I supposed to explain that my own sister won't help me?" "Tell him the truth," I said, reaching my car. "Tell him you expected me to pay for something you can't afford, and I said no like any reasonable person would. But I need this car." The desperation in her voice was real now. "My Honda is breaking down and I can't drive around in that piece of junk anymore. What will people think?" I paused with my hand on the car door handle. For a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the slap, the blood on my lip, and my parents' faces as they chose her over me without hesitation. "Figure it out, Madison, like the rest of us adults do." I drove away, leaving her standing in the parking garage. And for the first time in 3 days, I felt something like peace. That weekend, I decided to take a trip to clear my head. I'd been working so hard for years that I'd forgotten what it felt like to do something purely for my own enjoyment. I drove up to Lake Tahoe, checked into a cozy bed and breakfast, and spent 2 days hiking, reading, and remembering who I was before I became Madison's backup plan. It was during that peaceful weekend that I got the call that changed everything. "Miss Mitchell, this is Detective Rodriguez with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. I'm calling about your parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell." My blood turned to ice. "What happened? Are they okay?" "They're fine physically, ma'am, but they've been arrested on charges of embezzlement and fraud. We found your contact information in their emergency documents. We need you to come to the station to answer some basic questions about your family's financial situation." The drive back to town was a blur of confusion and disbelief. My parents arrested? It didn't seem possible. Dad had worked for the same insurance company for over 3 decades, and Mom had been a part-time bookkeeper for a local nonprofit. They were the most boring, law-abiding people I knew. The police station was exactly as depressing as you'd expect. Detective Rodriguez was a kind-faced woman in her 40s who led me to a small interview room that smelled like stale coffee and industrial disinfectant. "Your parents have been under investigation for approximately 18 months, she explained, opening a thick folder filled with documents. "We received multiple tips from employees at your father's company about irregularities in client accounts. The investigation revealed that your father had been systematically creating false claims and pocketing portions of insurance payouts over a period of 7 years. "That's impossible," I whispered. "My dad is the most honest person I know. The evidence is quite conclusive, I'm afraid. Bank records, altered documents, fraudulent claims. It all traces back to him. And your mother was involved as well. She helped him move money through the nonprofit where she worked creating fake vendor payments." Detective Rodriguez slid a document across the table showing financial transfers. It wasn't a photo of my parents in handcuffs, but rather a summary sheet of their financial crimes. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Approximately $850,000 over 7 years. Smaller amounts that flew under the radar longer, but it adds up." The number hit me like a physical blow. almost $3 million. The interesting thing is where the money went. Detective Rodriguez continued pulling out bank statements. Most of it was transferred to accounts in your sister's name. Designer shopping, luxury vacations, expensive restaurants. It appears your parents were funding quite an extravagant lifestyle. Madison's lifestyle, the designer clothes, the frequent trips with friends, the constant shopping sprees, the casual way she quit jobs knowing she'd be financially supported. It all made terrible sense now. Did Madison know where the money was coming from? That's what we're trying to determine. She claimed she had no idea her parents were stealing to fund her expenses. Says she thought they were just being generous. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Madison, who had never shown curiosity about anything that didn't directly benefit her, suddenly claiming ignorance about her parents' newfound generosity. What happens now, I asked. Your parents will likely face significant prison time. The nonprofit is suing for damages, and the insurance company is conducting its own investigation. All of their assets will be frozen and eventually liquidated to pay restitution. Detective Rodriguez paused, studying my face. I understand this is a lot to process. I sat there in that sterile room trying to make sense of how my boring conventional parents had become criminals. How had I missed the signs, the expensive gifts for Madison, the casual dismissal of financial concerns, the way they'd expected me to take over supporting her lifestyle? There's something else, Detective Rodriguez said gently. Your sister has been trying to reach you. She's been calling the station asking us to contact you. What does she want? The detective's expression suggested she'd rather not say. She wants you to know that she needs help with legal fees and living expenses now that your parents' support has stopped. She seems to think it's your responsibility as family. Even now, even with our parents in jail for embezzling money to fund her lifestyle, Madison was focused on getting her BMW. The audacity was breathtaking. I won't be posting bail, I said firmly, and I definitely won't be co-signing for anything. Detective Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That's probably wise given the circumstances. I left the police station with a folder full of information about victim services and court dates, but mostly I felt numb. In the span of a week, I'd lost my family and discovered they were criminals. The people who had raised me to value honesty and hard work had been stealing money to support my sister's shopping habits. The irony wasn't lost on me that they'd called me selfish for refusing to continue the cycle. My phone had 17 missed calls by the time I got home, all from numbers I didn't recognize. Madison had clearly enlisted more flying monkeys to guilt me into fixing her problems. I turned off my phone and poured myself a very large glass of wine. That evening, my doorbell rang persistently. I ignored it until whoever was outside started pounding on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Sarah. I know you're in there. Madison's voice carried through the door. We need to talk. I looked through the peephole to see her standing on my doorstep, still dressed in expensive clothes but looking frazzled in a way I'd never seen before. Her perfectly styled hair was messy and her makeup was smudged like she'd been crying real tears instead of her usual performance tears. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. What do you want, Madison? I need you to help me get a lawyer for Mom and Dad, she said without preamble. And I still need you to co-sign for my car. I can't keep driving that Honda. It's embarrassing and it broke down twice last week. I stared at her through the gap in the door, amazed by her priorities. Our parents were arrested for stealing money to pay for your lifestyle and you're worried about a car. That's not my fault, she protested. I didn't know where the money came from. I just thought they wanted to take care of me. You never wondered why they suddenly had so much extra money. You never questioned how they could afford to give you thousands of dollars every month. Her face flushed red. It's not my job to monitor their finances. I trusted them. The same way they trusted you to eventually become independent and stop draining their resources. Don't be such a Sarah. This is a family emergency. You have to help. Actually, I don't. You made it very clear that I'm not part of this family anymore, remember? Right before you slapped me and Mom and Dad threw me out. Madison's face crumpled and for a moment she looked genuinely desperate. That was just, we were upset. You know we didn't mean it. You meant every word. The only reason you want me back now is because your ATM got arrested. Please, she whispered. And I think these might have been the first genuine tears I'd ever seen from her. I don't know what to do. I don't have any money, and I don't know how to do things on my own. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of pity for my sister. She was 25 years old and had never learned basic life skills because our parents had enabled her helplessness. But then I remembered the slap, The entitled demands the years of being treated like her personal servant. Maybe it's time you learned, I said quietly, and closed the door. She pounded on it for another 10 minutes, alternating between threats and desperate pleas, but I didn't answer. Eventually, she gave up and left her heels clicking angrily down the hallway. The next 18 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, depositions, and court dates. The case moved slowly through the system, giving Madison time to craft her narrative and build her public persona. Madison didn't get a major book deal, but she did manage to sell her story to several online publications and started a blog called Surviving Family Betrayal. She gave interviews to local news stations and appeared on a few regional podcasts about financial crimes and family trauma. Her narrative was consistent. She was the innocent daughter who had trusted her parents completely and never questioned their sudden generosity. She painted herself as someone who was finding strength through adversity and learning to be independent for the first time. The reality was more complex. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Madison had moved in with her on-again, off-again boyfriend Jeremy, who apparently had been supporting her lifestyle throughout the legal proceedings. She wasn't quite the struggling survivor she portrayed online. When the trial finally happened, Madison's testimony was effective. She wore modest clothing and spoke about feeling confused and betrayed by her parents' deception. The prosecutor presented her as another victim of their crimes. The jury found our parents guilty on multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Dad got 4 years in federal prison. Mom got 2 years plus probation. Madison faced no charges and was officially recognized as a victim rather than an accomplice. I got peace of mind and a clear conscience. But the aftermath of the trial brought unexpected complications. Madison's blog and local media appearances had attracted some attention, and she'd started positioning herself as an advocate for financial abuse survivors. Watching her perform for the cameras was both fascinating and nauseating. She'd perfected a persona of wounded resilience, speaking in carefully measured tones about healing from betrayal and learning independence. She never mentioned the years of entitled demands, the expectation that others should fund her lifestyle, or the slap that had ended our relationship. The most infuriating part was how she'd rewritten history to make herself the victim of my abandonment. In interviews, she talked about how I had turned my back on family during their darkest hour and refused to help her rebuild after devastation. It wasn't a best-selling book, but her blog posts and local media appearances did attract followers. People online praised her strength and courage, while privately messaging me to call me heartless and selfish for not supporting her during the crisis. I briefly considered writing my own account, setting the record straight about what had really happened. But then I realized that defending myself would only give Madison's narrative more attention and credibility. The people who mattered already knew the truth, and I didn't owe explanations to strangers on the internet. Instead, I focused on building the life I'd always wanted, but never had time for while managing family crisis. I took a vacation to Japan, something I'd dreamed of doing for years, but could never afford while subsidizing Madison's lifestyle. I learned to paint, took cooking classes, and started hiking regularly with a group I joined through work. For the first time in my adult life, my weekends were my own. I wasn't fielding crisis calls from Madison or being guilted into family obligations that always seemed to involve my time, money, or both. I could make plans without worrying that I'd have to cancel them for some emergency that would turn out to be Madison's poor planning or unwillingness to face consequences. The freedom was intoxicating, but it also came with unexpected challenges. I'd spent so many years being the responsible one, the problem solver, the person everyone turned to in a crisis, that I didn't know how to just exist for myself. I had to learn what I actually enjoyed doing versus what I felt obligated to do. I discovered that I loved live music, but had rarely attended concerts because Madison always had some crisis that took priority. I enjoyed cooking elaborate meals, but had usually settled for quick dinners because I was too drained from family drama to spend time in the kitchen. I was actually quite social when I wasn't constantly stressed about managing other people's problems. 6 months after the trial, I was promoted to senior marketing director at my firm. My boss mentioned that my work had become notably more focused and creative over the past year, and I realized she was right. Without the constant mental load of anticipating and managing family crisis, I had energy to invest in my career in ways I'd never been able to before. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, and for the first time in my life, I had substantial disposable income. Not the kind that disappeared immediately into family emergencies or guilt-driven loans that were never repaid, but actual money I could use for myself. I bought a beautiful townhouse in a neighborhood I'd always admired but thought was out of my reach. It had a small garden where I could grow vegetables, a home office with natural light, and a guest room that I decorated exactly how I wanted without considering whether it would be suitable for Madison's visits. The housewarming party was small but perfect. Colleagues from work knew friends I'd made through my hobbies, and my cousin Jennifer, who had been one of the few family members to see through Madison's victim narrative. Nobody asked where my parents or sister were, and I didn't feel obligated to explain their absence. Around this time, I started getting messages from extended family members who had initially sided with Madison, but were beginning to see inconsistencies in her story. My cousin Jennifer, who had always been the black sheep for asking uncomfortable questions, called me one evening with observations that validated my own suspicions. "I've been watching this whole situation," she said, "and I just want you to know that some of us aren't buying Madison's complete innocence act. She's posting pictures from expensive restaurants while claiming to be struggling financially." "What do you mean? Look at her Instagram from last month. She's at that new steakhouse downtown with Jeremy ordering wine that costs more than I spend on groceries in a week, and she just posted photos from a weekend trip to Napa Valley. If she's really in financial crisis, like she claims in her interviews, where's this money coming from?" Other relatives began sharing similar observations. Madison's narrative of hardship didn't align with her social media posts showing designer purchases and weekend getaways. She might have been working part-time at a department store, but she was clearly receiving financial support from somewhere, most likely Jeremy, though she never mentioned him in her public story. I didn't engage much in these conversations. I appreciated the apologies and the acknowledgement that they'd judged the situation too quickly, but I wasn't interested in becoming the central hub for family gossip about Madison's inconsistencies. I'd spent too many years being the family's emotional dumping ground to willingly step back into that role. The most significant change wasn't financial or professional, though it was emotional. I'd spent so many years walking on eggshells, managing other people's feelings, and accepting blame for things that weren't my fault, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have my own emotional needs respected. In therapy, something I finally had time and mental space for, I learned about concepts like emotional labor and parentification. I realized that I'd been trained from a young age to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own well-being, and that this pattern had shaped every relationship in my life. Dr. Martinez, my therapist, helped me understand that my parents hadn't just failed to protect me from Madison's manipulation. They had actively participated in it by consistently choosing the path of least resistance. It was easier to pressure me to give in than to hold Madison accountable for her behavior. "You became the family shock absorber," she explained during one session. "Every time there was conflict or tension, you were expected to absorb it so everyone else could remain comfortable." This insight was both liberating and painful. Liberating because it helped me understand that my decision to cut contact wasn't cruel or selfish. It was necessary for my emotional survival. Painful because it forced me to grieve not just the loss of my current family relationships, but the realization that those relationships had never been what I thought they were. I believed I was loved and valued as a person, but I was really only valued for what I could provide. The moment I stopped being useful, I became disposable. That hurt in ways I was still processing months later, but it also explained why I felt so much lighter and happier without them in my life. I wasn't constantly bracing for the next crisis, the next demand, the next guilt trip. I could wake up in the morning and plan my day around my own priorities instead of someone else's emergencies. The day after sentencing, Madison managed to get my personal cell phone number and called from Jeremy's phone. "Sarah, I know you're angry, but I need you to understand something," she said without identifying herself. Though I recognized her voice immediately, I really was shocked when they got arrested. I had no idea Dad was doing anything illegal. "Okay," I said simply. "Okay, that's it. What do you want me to say? Madison, that I believe you, that I forgive you, that I'll support you now that Mom and Dad can't. Things are really tight right now, Sarah. The legal fees wiped out what little savings I had, and Jeremy can't support both of us long term. I need help getting back on my feet. There are programs for that. Job training, financial counseling, social services. You're an adult, figure it out. But I don't know how to do any of those things. Then learn the same way everyone else does." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had that familiar edge of manipulation I knew so well. "You know, people are starting to talk about how you abandoned your family during their time of need. How you could have helped, but chose to hold grudges instead. Is that really the reputation you want?" I almost admired her audacity. Even now, even after everything she was trying to guilt me into rescuing her. "Madison, do you remember what you said to me the night I walked out of Mom and Dad's house?" What you said I'd come crawling back, that I couldn't survive without you all. Do you remember that I was upset? You were wrong. I didn't just survive, I thrived. I got a promotion at work because I could finally focus on my career instead of managing your crisis. I bought a house because I wasn't spending my savings on your emergencies. I made new friends and developed hobbies because I wasn't available to drop everything every time you needed something. She didn't respond, so I continued. The reputation you're worried about, I don't care about it. The people who matter know the truth. The people who don't matter can think whatever they want. Sarah, please. I have to go now. I have plans with friends, and we're going wine tasting in Napa. It's amazing what you can afford to do when you're not supporting a grown adult who refuses to work. I hung up and blocked that number too. That was 2 years ago now. I've heard through the family grapevine that Madison and Jeremy broke up about 6 months after our parents were sentenced. She moved into a small apartment and has been working full-time at the department store, plus picking up shifts at a coffee shop on weekends. Some relatives have told me she's really changed and learned her lesson, but I'm not interested in testing that theory. I've also heard she's been asking family members for my current contact information, but so far, no one has given it to her. I've built a life that doesn't include managing other people's poor choices or accepting abuse in the name of family loyalty. I've learned that real family doesn't demand that you set yourself on fire to keep them warm. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh, if I should give them another chance. Then I remember the slap, the blood on my lip, and the casual way they discarded me when I wouldn't comply with their demands. I remember years of being taken for granted, treated like a resource rather than a person. The calls have stopped coming. The guilt trips have ended. My parents are serving their sentences, and Madison is learning to be an adult at 26. As for me, I'm finally living my own life instead of being a supporting character in someone else's drama. People sometimes ask if I miss them, if I regret cutting them off so completely. The honest answer is that I miss the family I thought I had, but I don't miss the people they actually were. I don't miss the manipulation, the entitlement, or the constant expectation that my purpose in life was to solve their problems. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even if they hate you for it. Especially if they hate you for it. The best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. It's building a life so good that you don't need their approval anymore. It's becoming so content with your choices that their opinions become irrelevant noise. I still live in the same town, and occasionally I see Madison at the grocery store or a restaurant. We nod politely but don't speak. She looks tired in a way that no amount of makeup can hide, like someone who's finally learning that actions have consequences. Part of me hopes she genuinely has learned and grown from this experience, but a bigger part of me knows that's not my responsibility anymore. I tried to teach those lessons for years through patience explanations and boundary setting. It took a federal investigation and losing her support system to accomplish what my words never could. I'm not the same person who sat at that dinner table over 2 years ago, shocked by my family's expectations and desperate for their approval. I'm someone who knows her worth isn't determined by how much she's willing to sacrifice for people who don't appreciate it. The phone calls stopped coming months ago, but if they started again tomorrow, I know exactly what I'd say. I'm busy living my life. You should try living yours. And then I'd hang up and go back to whatever I was doing. Because the most powerful revenge of all is indifference, the complete lack of concern for people who never showed concern for you. Some stories end with tearful reconciliations and lessons learned all around. This one ends with me realizing I never needed their approval to be worthy of love and respect. I just needed to stop accepting less than I deserved. The best part, I sleep better now than I have in years.